And welcome to EnterVR. My name is Chris Miranda, and today I am joined by Sean Edwards, the creator of Lunar Flight. Thank you for coming on the show, Sean.
Thanks for asking me to come and have a chat, Chris.
I'm very excited because Lunar Flight, from what I've been able to play, is such an awesome looking game. And this is, and so could you tell me what went into, your inspiration for this game? What was that whole building game process looking like?
I started working on Lunar Flight in 2010.
Sure.
So, 3 years ago, close to 3 years ago, around this time of the year, I think it was. I used to work I worked in the games industry for about 10 years in the Australian games industry, worked for a few different studios, and a lot of those studios closed up after the GFC, the global financial crisis.
Sure.
A lot of publishers pulled out of the Australian business, so while I was in between jobs, I started playing around with Unity one evening. A lot of my friends were using it. This is the first time I kind of tried it out. So one Sunday evening, just installed it, started playing around with it, and I had been playing this game called Armadillo Run for some time. It's a little indie game, and basically it's a physics game where you have to get a ball into an end zone, and you have to build using physics components and materials to get the ball to the end zone.
Nice. And
it had rockets as part of one of the little materials you could use. You could attach rockets and timers and make them fire off and carry the ball. And I really enjoyed that because you could just build it had a free build mode. And you could just build little rockets and stuff, and I really kind of enjoyed that because you can set how much thrust they had and all of those sorts of things. And I had fun just trying to get them to hover and playing around with the physics of it. So the first thing I kind of did in Unity was just made a box that and you could press a key and make it thrust up, and it had like 4 little stumpy legs on it as well. And I thought, okay, I got that working. I'll see if I can, add the analog control to it so I could, have a nice smooth input thrust for it. And got that working. And then, about a day or two later, I'd spent a crazy amount of time just playing with this thing. I got really, really absorbed in building. I was having a lot of fun with it. And I made a little prototype which, very much resembles what Lunar Flight kind of is today, with the split cameras. And if you play Lunar Flight without the Oculus mode, with the split view and all those sorts of things. So, I still had lots of time. So I just found I was bored, and I was just, one feature after another. I thought I'd add this thing, and then I'd add that thing, and it wouldn't be cool if you had fuel, and then that'd be sweet. You could run out of fuel. Oh, now we need bases, so you could fly between bases, and it literally just kind of grew. I didn't really set out to build a game, but it was just a little hobby project, and it reached a point where it's like, this is a game, really. I could wrap this up, finish it off, and maybe even sell it. It might not make much money, but I'll see how it goes. Here we are now. After I was still working while I was doing this. I got a new contract, couple of different contract positions while I was doing this in my spare time. But it became fairly obsessive once I kind of knew it was sellable. I was working a day job. I had a new baby arrive. 2011 was a pretty insane year for me. I think I had like 4 or 5 hours sleep a night during that year. And I released the game on Desura. It's like an indie client in about, I think it was like January 2012. And a few months later, I managed to get it published on Steam. So since then, the money that Steam was critical in me supporting the game since then, because the income I made off that was far outweighed anything I was making off Desura. And it was a hard sell because it's such a niche kind of game, but there was definitely an audience there for it, and I was still having fun with it. I've spent crazy amounts of hours, and I've noticed it has leaderboards, and I can kind of tell from that, looking at the numbers, it tracks, how much fuel, how many times people have crashed, how much fuel they've consumed, how much money they've got, and all those sorts of things. And it has an XP, so I can kind of gather, based on how much experience people have gathered, how much time they put into it. And there are people that have reached the highest rank. There's probably over 10 people that have reached the highest rank, which requires over 100 hours at least of playtime. So, that tells me that the game resonates with some people very strongly. So since then, I've been just trying to enhance and polish the game. It's like you said before, it's my baby. Really, it's something I care a lot about, and I have my frustrations, like a lot of people do, with how publishers handle their products. They kind of ship them out the door, maybe patch them once or twice, and they forget about them. And I think that's a real shame in a lot of cases. So, for me, I really care about the quality of the product. If there are any bugs or issues, I jump on them instantly. If people come to the forum with a problem, I try to answer every single issue that people have. So generally, I think that's worked because there's not really any negativity in my little small community that is there. Occasionally, I'll get some disgruntled people, and then after supporting them, they kind of turn around and change their attitude. So, and then so I released. I added the direct input support I was talking to you before about, and that allowed people to use any numerous number of controller setups. So those hands-on throttle, hands-off throttle and stick setup. So you got pedals and a throttle and a joystick, and you can configure it for those things. And I added multiplayer, added a Mars update, which added new dynamics to it. So there's a weather system, different gravity. And I actually, motivation for that was when Curiosity landed on Mars. There was a lot of people talking about Mars and a lot of stuff in the media about Curiosity. So I thought that was a good kind of marketing opportunity to try and raise awareness of the game again. And finally, the Oculus Rift support. What kind of motivated me to do that was, I think it was Heli Hell was one of the first early demos someone made. It was a little helicopter demo. You could fly around an island. There was a battleship and stuff. Yeah. And when I first tried that, once I got my Rift, I never really fully intended to do it. I was just saw the Rift like a lot of gamers, like, oh, cool, virtual reality. I want to try that. But when I tried Heli Hell, I was like, wow, I've got to put this in my game. My game is the flying game, and but I didn't really know how it was going to turn out. I hadn't built the cockpit or any of those things at that stage. So, but much like the rest of the game's development, once I kind of got into it, I was kind of hooked. It was like one thing led to another. I don't really sit down and work out a full feature set. I just I play the game a lot, and it tells me what the game needs from lots of play. Like I need this thing needs to be there, or I need this feature. So it's kind of a form from function kind of development process.
Wow.
How's that?
Yeah, I really admire your work ethic and the way you're running your business. I was checking out the forums and stuff, and I was looking at how you're interacting with your fans and your customers. That's really cool. More developers should be like you, man. That's really cool. And then my next question goes into the Rift. What was it about the Rift that you made it like a business decision? Hey, I'm gonna make this game compatible for this device. What was it about this device that you realized, like, all right, this has future?
Well, like I said, when I tried Heli Hell, I think for anybody who's tried the Rift and had a good experience with it, they tried a good demo, they tried it on hardware that's fast enough to give you a good frame rate, and it's V-synced. It's very important to get all those kind of things to come together, to have the best experience with it. For me, it was such a profound thing that I was like, yeah, this is something that's gonna happen, when you see a lot of those, big industry luminaries like, particularly in the Oculus Rift's pitch video for their Kickstarter, they had a lot of big names in there backing this thing, and when you got people like that saying, yeah, this is going to be a big deal, this is something you should pay attention to, then I'm generally going to pay attention to it. I've been in the industry a long time, and you kind of know who you should and shouldn't listen to, and those people don't speak unless they've got something to say. And now that Carmack has joined the company, that pretty much says everything about him. I tend to think he's a man who thinks very contemplatively about any kind of decision he makes or anything he wants to be involved in. And if he believes in it so much, then I feel fairly confident that it's something that I should be involved in. And like I said, I've been in the games industry a long time. For me, this is exciting because it's something new. It's I've been there and done it in all sorts of genres of games, and this is something fun, and it's kind of reignited my flame again to be into games. So like I said, when I started developing it for Lunar Flight, I think the impression most people get when they play Lunar Flight is the same kind of feeling I get when I play it. It's like that. It's like that because I felt the same thing. It's like, wow, this is awesome, and I just wanted to keep making it better and better. Whenever I encountered an issue, I wanted to try and really work around the dev kit's constraints. Mm-hmm. If there was something like text is not readable, mm-hmm. I spent a lot of time working out what could I do to improve that. So it's very optimized specifically for the dev kit in particular. I did have concerns that it might not upscale very well to a higher resolution, like things might be too chunky mm-hmm. or too large in size. But I tried it on the HD prototype at PAX Australia. Oculus was there, and they gave me an exclusive little few moments in the morning before they opened their doors to come in and give them a demo of the game.
Nice.
And try it on the HD kit, and it was awesome. It was like, even without the position tracking, even just with that resolution increase, you could see further. All the textures were much clearer. There was less swimming in the textures and all those sorts of things. So, and it looked fine. Like the text was even more legible because there's less aliasing and all those sorts of problems. So, but yeah, I spent a lot of time just tweaking the spacing and the scaling and the placement of objects, trying to find solutions to improve them. So one of the things I did was the little menus that pop up in front of you in the cockpit, they're actually on a curved mesh. And this is not an exact science. I actually do this for the main menu when you start the game, and it pops up to select your profile and those sorts of things. But what I kind of figured was, the ideal thing for that space is a spherical kind of mapping of things that are facing towards you. So by doing that, it actually reduces some of the aliasing because you're turning things that are directly in front of you look fine, but as you turn to your right, if you have a flat plane, it kind of trails off and then it gets further away, and the perspective is aimed away from you. But if you turn it in a little bit, you kind of maintain that accuracy. So I feel that actually reduces some of the aliasing in the fonts and makes it more legible. And there's a video I released not so long ago where I introduced myself, and there's a little short clip of it rotating around the cockpit showing that, and you can see the meshes there and how curved they actually are. But in the game, they don't look very curved because of the perspective and the angle. So I thought that was kind of an interesting approach to try and solve that thing. But it kind of made sense to project things onto a curved surface. But I think there might be some real science behind that somewhere. I don't know what it is, but there's probably some math behind the ratio between the distance of the viewer's viewpoint and how far away that is, and how big objects are, and the size of it can be relative to the scale of whatever it is you're rendering, but that's limited by your pixel resolution. So I think there's some interesting research to be done there, just on creating user interfaces and how you render information.
Definitely. Let me ask you about the learning curve. How has been the learning curve from developing for regular flat screens to virtual reality? Has it been a very noticeable shift?
Not really. Okay. It's really straightforward, and in a lot of ways a lot of the things that you would do as tricks in traditional game development, you have to build things like they are in reality, because you can't hide things, because particularly when we get the positional tracking, people are going to be able to move around a little bit more, or at least for things that are in cockpits are going to be somewhat problematic for me, because I can't constrain the person, and if I do constrain them, then they're going to feel weird when it stops moving but they're still moving. So how do you deal with that kind of issue? And in Lunar Flight, you're in this big bulky spacesuit, so you really shouldn't be moving far. So I think what I'm going to do there is I'll allow you to move around, and it will probably just let you move beyond the constraints of that, and you may see some weirdness, like the camera might move detach from the location of the suit. The suit will stop moving, but it'll still let your head move around.
Sure.
That way, so you don't kind of get disoriented by your head tracking. But there's just some visual issues there that might cause problems. But originally I I'd modelled the parts of the cockpit and I'd removed some of the faces on them because I knew, you couldn't see them. But then I realised, well, yeah, later if you can shift around the cockpit, you are going to be able to see those surfaces. So I actually need to put them back in there. And so those are the sorts of things you would do in traditional game development. You would remove surfaces from things the player can never get to. But once you're in virtual reality, it's highly likely that the player can get into situations where you can see things you wouldn't normally be able to see. Some other issues like some rendering effects that are based on the projection of a camera. When you've got two cameras and they have to combine the shader effect into one because they're rendered, I'm not sure how to solve some of those issues. My level of experience in development, I spent 10 years as a designer, a technical designer more so than a programmer. I studied programming before I started my first game development job, and that was my first job was as a level designer, not a programmer. So, but like I said, when I started on Lunar Flight, I had to kind of dig all that stuff back out of the back recesses of my brain where it had been sitting there for a long time and not really touched and was a bit foggy. So it all could slowly come back to me. I'm a better programmer now than I was when I first started Lunar Flight. But I have a kind of fairly cross-discipline level of experience. I can use 3ds Max, I can use Photoshop. I have a fairly thorough understanding of design principles and methodology in game development. So, yeah.
Wow.
Master,
that's pretty awesome.
Knower of all and master of none.
That's still pretty awesome, man. That you're a Swiss Army knife of game development. That's really cool. And it's definitely better than me, most people. So has there been a lesson in there that is in developing for the Rift that you've sort of caught you by surprise that you weren't expecting?
Not so much that caught me. Like I said, it's really, really, really intuitive when you think about what it actually is. It literally is just a pair of eyes in a 3D space. And the biggest challenges are solving the interaction issues, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you let people interact in this space when they can't see their hands? And that's why I made the conscious decision to actually put a model of a 360 controller, because I kind of wanted to make that the default way of playing the game. If you're going to play this game, please play it with an Xbox controller, because that's the way it's designed. That's what it's intended for. But when you're sitting in a seat and you're holding an Xbox controller, there's this one-to-one relationship with what you're feeling and you're seeing. And I think that's one extra thing that helps reduce the nausea and your brain's ability to accept what's going on,
Yeah.
So a lot of people talk about Lunar Flight being a low nausea or almost no nausea experience. They can play the game for hours and not really experience any nausea. And I think the reason for that, largely cockpit-based games, you've got a strong frame of reference. You've got this big static object that fills a large part of your field of view and it doesn't move. And you're seated in a seat and your brain sees all those things. And for all intents and purposes, what's happening out the screen could just be a TV in front of you, So, but I think once we increase the resolution, your depth perception increases. So you might be able to, your level of depth perception and stereo ability to perceive the depth and the 3D and the stereoscopic nature of it will increase. So it'd be interesting to see if increasing the resolution might actually make it feel even more immersive. And I'm not sure if I'm hitting the right target with what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean. Like if it feels like it's just a screen in front of you that's moving, you're less likely to feel sick. Whereas if you're playing a first-person shooter, like if you get out of the lunar module and start walking around, you're probably likely going to experience some nausea, because I know I do. I put it in there because it's kind of nice to get out and walk around it and look at the base and the buildings and things and get a sense of the scale of it all. On that issue of scale, actually, when I built Lunar Flight, this is a kind of funny story. It's a simulation, right? So it should be built to scale.
Yeah.
And when I first started playing with Unity, I had a lot of trouble, and I know a lot of other people had a lot of trouble with this, was importing models from a 3D package into Unity isn't that straightforward, because different packages uses different coordinate systems, so whether Z is up or Y is up. So your model comes in rotated on a different angle, and you're using different unit scales, whether it's 1 meter or 1 centimeter per unit, those sorts of things. Unity is 1 meter per unit. and ensuring that things come in correctly is critical. And for all this time, I thought Lunar Flight was, was built to scale. And the thing that revealed this was wrong was that the default prefab that you get from the Oculus SDK for Unity, it's pretty much set up to be a correct scale human with 64mm eye separation.
Huh.
I dropped their player controller into my scene, and it looked like I was standing next to this little model of a lunar module, and I was like, what's going on here? This is just not right. And it soon dawned on me what was wrong, and I went and checked the import settings in Unity, and it was 0.3, not 1.
Oh, wow.
It was only 30% of the scale that it should be. And I was like, oh no, this is not something I want to know, just keep that in the closet and shut the door. But I found a solution for it. Ultimately, Lunar Flight is fairly accurate in its physics of representation, but my approach to it is actually more of a feel of what people perceive things should feel like on the moon, like low gravity, low kind of floaty. All the things behave correctly. There's no friction. All the inertia and stuff is there. But so anyway, what I worked out I could do was actually this revealed something about the Rift and a common misconception that I think a lot of people have with what adjusting the IPD in a Rift title does. And the Oculus SDK, all it does when you change the IPD is it changes the separation of the cameras, how far apart they are.
Sure.
And what this does is it changes your perception of scale, how large objects feel. So you can imagine if you were really big, your eyes would be much further apart, and objects would look much smaller to you. But if you're really, really small, your eyes are really, really close, and objects appear really, really large. And you can replicate this in the game. You can put a slider there. You could probably use this as an effect, where, like Alice in Wonderland, you eat a mushroom or something, you get really, really small. All you would need to do is adjust the IPD and reduce the distance between the cameras. It would not, and a lot of people think this affects their the quality of the image quality or how blurry the image is, but it doesn't affect any of those things. It only affects your perception of scale. The reason it might influence your perception to nausea and those sorts of things is what you want to do is get as close to what your real world IPD is and your height, so that things appear as they do to you in real life, so your brain feels more at ease with what it's seeing, if that makes sense. So what I realized I could do was, all I had to do was multiply the IPD by that import scale, that import factor. So as soon as I did that, I multiplied by 0.3, and suddenly everything looked the right scale again.
Nice, very nice.
It was simple as that.
I need to ask you about your a little bit about the future, and Lunar Flight is probably the most functional, most complete, ready to go game for the Rift when it gets released, and I think when the Rift gets released. But looking forward and seeing what in you personally as a developer, like what is the best case scenario? What is the worst case scenario that could happen for Lunar Flight and the Rift in general when this thing gets launched? Are you expecting for there to be an app store, or are you hoping that there's going to be an Oculus solution for software? For a software ecosystem, what do you?
I think I didn't really answer your question before. I think you asked me about what I was developing for the Rift. What gamble on it really is that like I said before, I believe this thing's going to happen. I think it's such a compelling experience that it's definitely going to happen, and there's such a big swell of interest in it that pretty much everyone that's bought a dev kit is probably going to go and buy a consumer kit as well. And a lot of those people probably already own a copy of Lunar Flight. But I have this kind of feeling that best case for me is the Rift, the consumer kit comes out, and they sell a couple of 100,000 units. That's good numbers for me. In that, if there aren't too many titles out and there isn't much to buy for it, then pretty much good chance every one of those persons is probably going to pick up my game. And that'd be great, because that'll actually exceed the sales that I've already done on the game. The game's sold about 70,000 units. If another 100,000 people bought the game, that would be really awesome. That would set me up to really what I want to do moving on is actually get some more people involved and have a larger team.
Yeah.
But so that would be best case for me. It comes out and it's still fairly cost effective. It's around $300 to $400, and there's a lot of people that are sitting on the fence waiting to buy one, but waiting to see what the consumer kit is like.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a potential that they will sell a couple 100,000 units pretty quickly in the first 3 to 6 months, maybe more. Who knows? And worst case is that there aren't many titles. And if you don't have software, like any device, if you don't really have any killer apps, then people might buy one and then it'll sit on the shelf and it won't get much use. In 6 months' time, no one's talking about it and it kind of dies and withers away. I kind of don't think that's going to happen. I think that the biggest problem is hardware performance. Like if you're going to have games, even Lunar Flight, I have a 6970 Crossfire system. So two GPUs, 6970s. They're 2 generations old now, but it's still fairly powerful in Crossfire. And even it can't run Lunar Flight at 1920 by 1200 with everything maxed out and sustain 60 frames per second. I can if I drop the pixel lighting to vertex and set the shadows to medium. They're probably the most expensive things. And then my machine will hold 60. Like I said before, I'm in some respects an amateur when I build an entire game by myself. So I definitely think I could have optimized Lunar Flight a lot more. And a company that has the resources to, build level of detail meshes for every object and, a whole engineering team to work on optimizing the code base and things like that could build something really fast. And I think just recently I did a little experiment with one of Unity's projects called Angry Bots, and I added a third-person perspective mode to it. I wanted to try with things that aren't just first-person perspectives. I think the Rift is a great 3D viewer. It could be used for things just as a 3D device, for viewing things in 3D. And I wanted to try that. So, and that particular project was optimized for a mobile platform. So everything is light mapped and everything, all the textures are packed really tightly, so that it's really, really optimized and it runs really, really fast. Wow. So I think there's a potential there to build games. They're not photorealistic, but as long as they're running super fast and they're fun, I don't think that really matters. I think that's what Oculus are talking about when they're talking about building an Android platform into the headset with a GPU and everything on it and having it self-contained, is that you could build fairly compelling experiences that don't have to be super high detail with really complex shaders and all that sort of stuff, and still have really great experience that runs really, really fast. So, and getting back to that point of software, who knows what is in the works, like what Oculus has funded themselves. Like they probably realize they need a killer app. They probably need to put some money into some developer to encourage them to do it, or go to a publisher and say, we will put some money into something if you allocate some resources to this. I don't know, maybe they've tried doing that. You've got Eve VR. It's probably the only title where they've committed to VR. You hear about other games like
Star Citizen is doing one of them.
Star Citizen doing it, but I'm still waiting to see how they deal with their user interface.
Sure. Yeah.
And a lot of these, and even with EVR, I don't think that those games aren't Oculus Rift games per se. They're games that have Oculus Rift support. So unless they've rebuilt an entire new UI system for the Rift, or they've found some way to make the standard UI work with the Rift, I think there's a problem there where these games are going to have support, but they still won't be built for the Rift, if you know what I mean. Like they're not like Lunar Flight everything in terms of its design in the Oculus build was built to work within the constraints of VR. Whereas these games, and I had that kind of luxury, it's just me and I can take that risk, but these companies have to make a game where they've got a 20-man team, which is like EVR, and they're spending millions of dollars, and they're taking a gamble on this. They want to be able to sell this game to people who don't have a Rift as well. So they have to make a compromise there, or they're either going to build two interfaces, one that works with the Rift and one that doesn't. That's not entirely impossible. You can do that. So, Lunar Flight is an example of that. If you don't have a Rift, you can play Lunar Flight without the Oculus Rift.
So do you think that gives you an advantage, the fact that, one, VR games designed from the ground up for VR will feel better. So the first assumption is yes, games designed for VR will feel better than games ported to VR, and the second assumption is because of that, developers and big publishers aren't willing to take the risk going forward because they want to create good quality games that will not only port good for the Oculus but also for other platforms because they want to make money. And so because of that, they won't be competing against you in the beginning. I mean, that's two
Yeah,
fairly big
that,
assumptions.
that's exactly what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I don't really. It's a hard thing for me to hope because I want there to be a lot of games for the Rift, right?
Definitely.
I want there to be titles because I want to play them. But that's my my strategy really. Is my best guess is that the big guys with the lots of money and the big AAA produced titles, you're not going to see them at launch that are really refined and really built as a VR experience.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some that come out with support for it, but they'll be kind of hybrid solutions, and they'll probably have compromises in some places. But I'm a believer that within 6 months of the consumer kit release, there's going to be some really amazing, compelling things happening, and there's probably, like I said, there's probably stuff being developed that we don't know about. There's probably stuff, Oculus always talk about stuff that they know of that they haven't announced, and there's some really exciting things happening. That might just be PR talk, or it might actually be the case. Certainly Valve is doing a lot of work, and there's another example. Valve believes in this thing. They're spending money and resources on working on this and solving these things because they know. And anyone that's experienced they go from being a skeptic to being a believer because they, and I myself now when I play games, any game, and I play a lot of games, it just feels so weird playing stuff on a screen now because you're not in it. It feels like you're looking at a screen, and if there's something about that, it's like it's ruined it for you. You know, like
welcome to the club.
What you want now is to experience those things, encompassing your vision. So that's why I believe that once this thing gets traction and the experience is much more polished and they solve a lot of the nausea issues and resolution issues, it's going to happen. I'm still wondering how they're going to deal with the peripheral support. So like I said, I make the Xbox controller pretty much a requirement to play the game. But not everybody owns an Xbox controller, and certainly not everybody owns a Hydra or a similar device. That's a niche market within a niche market, So
Yes.
I kind of refuse to support those things because no one's going to own them. I can't sell a game that has been built for those devices and expect a lot of people to be able to buy the game because it's such a small market.
Yeah, and it's such a smart choice because Razer Hydras have been really hard to acquire nowadays. Like and they're
it's not that I'm against it. I think they're great. I'm a big fan of devices. I've got a big expensive steering wheel and a hands-on throttle system and pedals.
Yes.
I buy that stuff, but I know myself. I want to make stuff that as many people as possible can buy and play, and I'm worried about those things being pretty much necessities. There's only so much you can do with the head tracker as an input device, like Proton Pulses, and I think that was a really great example. That was probably another game that really inspired me when I first saw that. I thought, wow, here's someone thinking out of the box, using the head tracker as an input device. And there's only so many games that are going to be able to use it, I think. But like the mobile industry and touch devices, we've seen an amazing amount of new innovation spawned out of touch input and ideas come out of that. So who knows what we're going to have.
In your personal view, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. In your personal view, what is the input device of the future? What do you think is meant to be for VR? Like, we might not have it yet, but in your mind, it's the one.
The number one thing they need is hand tracking.
Yeah.
Gloves. A cheap, affordable gloves. 2 pairs of gloves you can put on, really low latency. When you look down, you just see those hands there, and you can wiggle your fingers, and they just wiggle, And then now you can just reach out and touch things. You need haptic support, right? You need feedback. So if you're going to press a button, it's going to feel a bit weird seeing it animate and touch, but not actually get any response back into your finger. So there's some things, but those things are expensive. But if there's a market there, it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing. You can't. I actually looked into a company that makes a company called Animazoo, I think they're called, and they make these gloves for the animation industry, but they're really expensive. They're like $16,000 a glove per glove.
Wow.
But they do full motion tracking. But they're so expensive because they're handmade, and they don't sell a lot of them. But if you had an industry where you could sell 1 million of those things, I'm sure the price would come down dramatically.
Definitely.
But all these things have to come together. But I think it's going to happen. There's just slow steps towards that. Once you have a market there, and a lot of people have the device, then you can build a peripheral. Like who would have thought plastic guitars would sell in their millions in the last console generation, right?
Yeah.
Or even the previous one, Guitar Hero craze, and everyone went out and bought these plastic guitars, and maybe more than one, or Rock Band and those sorts of things. So you need to have that hardware install base before you can sell peripherals like that.
Yeah.
So but I think it's going to happen. Like I said before, it's such a profound thing that once you've experienced it, you want to experience more things like that.
Definitely.
Myself, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I've been thinking about making some smaller scale projects that are kind of like what you would get on mobile devices, where like an endless runner, or these things that are they're small enough in scope that a small team can build, make it really, really polished, but again built for VR. It's a really specific experience. So something people can try on, have fun with it. I know there's a lot of people out there that want a really immersive VR experience. They want to play Skyrim in VR. So do I.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to get that early, in the early stages, unless Bethesda comes around and says, you know what, their UI system is fully configurable. They could allocate a few resources to adding native support to Skyrim, and solve all those issues with their shadows and things like that.
I'm willing to pay for Skyrim full price if they went out and said, yeah, we're gonna re-release this for VR. Like, I would, because I'm one of those people that would, immediately, just because it's just Skyrim in VR. Holy moly!
I don't think that's out of the question. When you look at, if when Consumer Kit comes out, and it is a big hit, and there's a lot of people wanting to try it, and then, the guys at Bethesda, I'm sure they've tried the Rift themselves, and I'm sure they've contemplated it. Wouldn't it be great if we could do this? But those big companies just can't move like that. It's very often not. Well, companies like Valve can, because Valve, they're very different from other companies.
They're the exception.
They have guys that just build stuff, and they just give them money, and they go away and build stuff, and they trust that they're going to try and do something cool. If they don't do something cool, they probably get let go eventually. But companies like Bethesda and publishers, they don't kind of operate that way. They don't really have R&D teams that just go away and try and make stuff. They have their budget, and they have to deliver on stuff, and they have to make money. So
that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think because if what would happen if they realize 6 months into the Rift, holy moly, Lunar Flight is making a lot of money, and we can get in there now and tell a couple engineers, developers, hey, work on this, for a month, make Skyrim fully compatible for the Rift. Does that, the ability for them to turn around, does that worry you, or does that excite you? What is that?
It doesn't really worry me at all. Like, you're never going to be able to compete with a multi-million-dollar budget, really, as an indie. But the advantage indies have is they can take risks and eat noodles every day and just try things that the publishers just will not touch. You always have that kind of, you can be a rebel and be out in the Wild West and try things that they won't. But for them to seriously consider it, like they've made so much money off Skyrim now. For them, it'd be like a few peanuts to go back and add that. And the only reason they may do it is go, we want to do some R&D on this because we might build a VR title in the future. We already have a project that could be supported. And this is what Valve did with Half-Life, right? Like, they go, we've got an old game. It's a good test case because Half-Life 2 is quite old.
And you're back.
Yeah.
Okay. Half-Life 2 is?
Half-Life 2 is it's fairly optimized, so and it's fairly old now. So most people's machines can run it fairly fast. And I think that's why Valve used that rather than trying to build a new game. They just took something they already had and work out how to add VR to it. Bethesda may do the same thing. They're like, we need to do some experiments. We've already got a game. It's not that difficult to add VR.
Yes.
to drop the cameras in and integrate them. So, and then they have to just solve some of the issues. Then they have to look at the scope of work they would have to do to fix all those things. Like, do they have cinematics that control the camera? You know, all those sorts of things. And sometimes that happens in Skyrim. You know, the camera turns to look at something, and you never want to do that in VR. Those are some of the things I've learned, is that you never want to take control of the camera away from the person's head, because that makes them feel ill. So, and there's a case where if you're going to build a game for VR, that has to be a constraint. You have to work with that constraint. You have to always dip to black whenever you're going to cut the scene. So I do that in Lunar Flight. Whenever there's a change in scene, except during the loading screen, you get a 3D loading screen, and right just before it finishes loading, it stalls. That's not always pleasant, but usually I try to make sure it fades to black whenever I change the scene, and then fades in, so you never get disoriented. So
yeah, that works. That really works. The fading to black, I'm surprised how well that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very, very simple solution, but it's critical, because if you suddenly snap to a different scene, it's it's not pleasant. So, but it's a basic thing to do. I think good thing with Half-Life 2 is that from memory, I don't think it does ever draw the camera's viewpoint, and everything, all the cutscenes, all the characters are all done in first person, right? So it's a great game. I think the only thing I've heard people criticize really is the loading screens. Like, you reach the end of a level and suddenly it just hangs while it loads the next section in. I think now computers have a lot more memory, so they probably could go back and join a bunch of levels more tightly together and load them all at once and reduce some of that, or change the triggering system so when you hit the end it fades down before it actually loads the level.
I have a quick question. In terms of, again, looking towards the future, 2 years from now, the people like you who've jumped into VR from the get-go, like, will we see two types of developer come out? Because VR is gonna get so fleshed out, and I think the book is barely even being written, or there is no book for how to write or how to do VR properly. So, in 2 years, do you think we'll have two sets of developers, a VR developer and a regular, flat screen sort of developer, or will they be just, interchangeable parts of the same thing? What do you think?
Well, yeah, you'll always have specialized skills, Boo. If you want to be an expert at anything, you generally need to specialize. Assuming the scope of knowledge you can learn about that particular thing is large enough. Augmented reality is an entirely kind of different thing altogether. It has different problems and things you need to solve, and spending a lot of time thinking and solving those things. Generally, I think what tends to happen, though, is like today now we have middleware, and we have all of the problems and solutions to things that we've solved over the last 10, 20 years in gaming. Is so cheap and affordable for anyone to go and get now. A lot of the solutions to how you handle input or character movement and all those sorts of things used to be like, innovations and ideas and new things that people came up with. Now it's like, whatever, a game has to have a billion number of features that we've all seen before it's even considered to be a good game. Or, if you're in a particular genre of game, you have to have X, Y, and Z before, you can start pushing the boundaries. So I think the same sort of thing will eventually happen in those different aspects. In augmented reality, over time, certain developers will demonstrate showcases for how to do certain things, and everybody will copy what they're doing, unless they can patent these things. The games industry has proven that it's very difficult to patent those sorts of things. The user interface design and all those sorts of things. Generally, we don't like it because we all kind of borrow it from each other, and it allows our industry to grow, really. There are lots of first-person shooters. There are lots of top-down strategy games. They all use mouse rectangle selection to select units and things like that, And the same case will be for VR and augmented reality. There'll be certain ways that we know, certain solutions that we know that work, and everybody will kind of imitate those solutions.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good explanation. Thank you for that. Yeah, you're right. So is there going to be a Lunar Flight 2? Is that too much to add? Like, are you definitely thinking about working on this further along in the future, or You know what? Actually, let's go back to Android and mobile, because that's if there's money to be put on the table. Do you think Android and mobile VR will take off? Will there be a market for this?
I think it'll be a different device. I think that there's always going to be, well, it depends on how the subsequent versions of the headset or what Oculus build or any other company builds. Whether you can plug it into, and I think they actually already said this. They said, even if we build an Android device into the headset, you'll still be able to plug it into a PC and use it as you would traditionally use it. I think it's something you asked about earlier, is that whether there would be an app store. I definitely think there will be an app store at some point. I think Oculus Share, the official Oculus Share site, is the foundations for what Oculus' app store will eventually be. You'll be able to buy games, or the indie developers will be able to sell VR games through there, and that'll be your one-stop portal to find content for the Rift. It kind of already is, stuff that's been kind of verified and quality checked, I guess. Much like any other app store, and I think eventually there'll also be a client like Steam or something like that, where you when you go to use your Rift, you fire the client up, and that's kind of the starting point of accessing all your content. And there are already some indies developing solutions like this, right? Like there's little app launchers and things like that, and you launch them from within VR. So you launch a game, and you exit back into the launcher. I do believe that's something that they have on the cards. I think at some point, I think they'll wait until the hardware is there for that kind of integrated solution, because it's kind of there now, and you probably could build something, but it's probably not at a performance level where you can build something quite what the consumers would want in terms of graphical fidelity. Mm-hmm. But that's coming, like in another year or two, we're going to be X points beyond where we are now in terms of performance in mobile devices. And, it's believed, if we keep going the way we're going, it's believed that do you know who Ray Kurzweil is?
Yeah, the Singularity guy.
Well, he believes that, the performance of things is growing at an exponential rate. It's not just this kind of linear increase in performance. Things are going to get faster and faster and get faster at getting faster, if you know what I mean. So, 5 years from now, it's, if that's true, then there's going to be some pretty powerful hardware around. And that's definitely what we need to reach that kind of ideal point that, kind of think of the Valve engineer's name, but he was saying that, you got to reach around an 8K resolution to eliminate pixels altogether. Wow. And at that resolution, the hardware performance you need to render a game is just crazy, right? Like, yeah. You would need a quad SLI machine right now to even render at 60 frames, just a single camera at that kind of resolution, So we're a long way from hitting that kind of performance. But it'll happen,
Yeah, I feel like I'm not sure where I got. There was someone arguing that the birth of VR will help catapult graphic processors and just machines in general. It'll incentivize, graphic cards makers to make cards that are more powerful and machines that are.
But there's limits to what engineers can do. If that were the case, then we'd have, do we know whether a company like NVIDIA already has their several next generations already designed and built, and they're just sitting on them waiting to control the market? Do you know what I mean? Like, they just sit on them and release them slowly so they can always have a product to release, to build up, to release after their next product, so they can keep the market going along. I don't really think that's the case. I think when you get a new generation of hardware from them, that's what they've been working up to, and they may be planning 12 months ahead of what their next designs are and how they're going to improve the hardware, but it doesn't exist yet, and they've got to build it yet. So, I think we're kind of, the performance level we're at and making it cost effective and being able to sell it at a price point that is acceptable to consumers. Mm-hmm. That's the case. So, but it's definitely will spur, assuming it's a big hit, and VR penetrates not just the gaming industry, but all sorts of industries in terms of relaxation, training, education, all sorts of things. and it makes a huge impact on society, much like mobile devices have in its adoption, then yeah, maybe that will spur a lot more innovation and investment in improving the performance and solving these issues.
So you bring up a good point, because as we speak, do you think we will see a consumer Rift that will be HD, or do you think it'll be 4K? I've been seeing articles online where 4K displays are getting really, really cheap right now because Apple just signed a deal with a factory in China. It's been signing deals with factories in China for their next iPad displays to be 4K. In any case, what I'm thinking is, well, if Oculus decides to come out swinging with a 4K display, will they be shooting themselves in the foot because not a lot of people will be able to afford the technology to run those devices, or what do you think?
I don't think that's the case at all. I think Oculus are really smart, and they're going to be very careful about the panel that they select. I think they're going to accept that there's only that performance issue you just mentioned is very, very critical in the success of its launch. So you want as many people to be able to buy it and run it at its native resolution and get reasonable performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely do not believe that they're going to go for the highest end panel that they can get for that thing. They wouldn't be able to afford to put it in and sell it to you cheaply enough, So I think that they will probably end up it'll probably be a 1080p display. It'll be whatever's in the HD kit right now, because they'll be able to get them cheap. They may be able to get them modified to some spec that they require. But I certainly don't believe. I hear a lot of people, it's what people want, and the people who are most loudest about this are the people that have the massive high performance PCs and they're really invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the market. They're not the target market for this thing at all. So no, I think they're going to be very careful about the panel selection that they go for. They'll pick one that is better than the dev kit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if you've used it, but I would be quite happy with 1080p. I've played Lunar Flight in it. For me, that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
And as long as they solve all the other problems, improve all the other things, that's a perfect device. That's great. That would be just resolution be high enough that most people have gaming machines right now that they could run things at an acceptable frame rate. And then once they've established themselves, then they can go on the next iteration of the hardware. Then they can improve it, because they've established their market. They've already got buy-in by a market, that people that believe in it, they want the next piece of hardware.
Definitely.
They will buy the next kit, So it's, I think a lot of people are kidding themselves if they think that's going to be the case. Even though that they know that that's what's required to improve the experience, that's not going to happen.
Okay, so this is where you and I are. There's a fork in the road, and you and I are going to have to disagree. I'm about to bet with you. San Francisco pizza. I will ship it. I will send it to your house. Let's. Pizza Orgasmica in San Francisco. So I'll send you I think it's called the Latin Lover. Yeah, I'll send you a Latin Lover, a large pizza if they come out with an HD display instead of a 4K. I really, really think that they're gonna come out swinging. As irrational as it sounds, I know I sound completely irrational, but I think the moment people are, because I think that's what it's gonna take for them to be able to compete against the PS4 and whatever HMD Sony comes out with, and Xbox, and hopefully they won't have to compete with Steambox, but that's a possibility. We don't know yet. I think for them to compete with these huge guys, I really think they're gonna have to come in and swinging, and people are gonna be at Best Buy or Target, and they're gonna put on that 4K display, and they're gonna realize, oh my God, it's the fucking future. I'm going to join it now.
I'm not sure if the resolution is the thing that's important for people to have a great experience, right? And I'm not sure why you think they're competing with the console industry or even the Steambox, because for me, it's a peripheral device. It's not a platform. I know they will talk about it as a platform, but for a lot of people, they will see it as a VR headset that requires software that other developers are going to develop for it. So, again, for me, it's two things. It's the cost for the panel to reduce the cost of selling the headset to make it mass marketable, and the performance requirements to run it at its native resolution. And there's probably only 1% of the industry, or games that even have hardware that can come close to that.
Mm.
I certainly don't have that, and I don't want to buy a headset that I can't use effectively. So I'd rather one that I can run at its native resolution, because usually that is much more optimal.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you might be right. Maybe they can downscale. They don't have to run at its native resolution. You could run things at a lower resolution, but you introduce artifacts when you downscale. But who knows, man?
Who knows at this point? Yeah, you're right. I'll probably get your address later so I can send you that pizza, because I already know that your points,
Send me a picture of fun.
your logic is flawless. No, so yeah, it's gonna be very interesting. It really is gonna be very interesting. So philosophically, do you think VR is going to be just a peripheral thing that we use aside from gaming and other forms of entertainment, or do you think we're talking about pie in the sky sort of stuff and just, completely, speculation. Like, do you think 5 years, 10 years from now, VR will be a medium of information that will replace something, or will be something that, is a surplus of all the information devices that we already have?
It has to supplant an existing thing. Like, I wouldn't want to work in VR. I don't think it's yet, unless somebody comes around with some really innovative tools that make developing games, for example, or if I can't see the keyboard, I can't program in VR. There's all these kind of physical constraints with VR. So I don't think it's going to become the one and only all-encompassing device that people use, and they don't ever use anything else, or they're walking around with VR devices strapped to their head or anything like that. But I think just like people have these gaming PCs in their houses and they use them a lot, as long as the experience is compelling enough and powerful enough, people are going to want to use it, and that's all that really matters, right? Is like, if you're compelled to put that thing on your face and use it because you enjoy it so much, you're going to use it, and that's all that has to happen.
Yeah.
But I think in saying that, much like 3D TVs, people just can't be bothered getting their 3D glasses out when they watch a 3D movie. It's or if they have a room full of people and there is only two pairs of glasses, do you run it in 3D and annoy all those other people? They're just some issues that I guess that we're yet to see if they're going to be a real problem. Some people just don't want to wear it on their face. I've had some people try it and they sweat profusely when they put it on. Mm-hmm. And I think there may be ways of solving those issues in terms of its design. Mm-hmm. But who knows? No,
definitely. What do you think will be the impact of you've heard that Sony wants to get in the game. What do you think will be the impact of VR if all of a sudden the consoles are adopting VR type? And you know what? It won't take off next year, definitely, because there's no games, even for the PS4, there's not that many games out there yet. But do you think that it'll affect Oculus, and will it affect your bottom line, or will you be able to port over to PS4?
I don't know. The new consoles are certainly powerful enough to have compelling VR experiences. As I mentioned before, if you optimize the art enough and the game itself, you could run something on 60 frames per second at 1080p on those devices and have pretty cool looking games. But there's been a lot of talk about Sony getting involved, and yet we've not really seen anything out of Sony. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people underestimate the research that Oculus has been doing all this time. And certainly with having Carmack there doing all these really far out kind of programming solutions to solving a lot of things that I don't think their engineers would even contemplate. And there's a lot of smart people in the world, but when you spend a lot of time looking and thinking about these issues, I think Sony's going to be behind the ball, and it would make more sense for Sony to license the Oculus technology and for them to have a relationship, and Oculus to take advantage of Sony's engineers or hardware engineers to build the components and drive the cost down, than it would for them to compete against each other. So that would make more sense to me.
Yeah, but I guess it's definitely something yet to be seen. But
I'm really surprised. Maybe they do have some incredibly smart people, and they've been sitting on some crazy technology for some time. Mm-hmm. But I think, in my experience, people sometimes aren't as smart as you think they are. Certainly corporations, they just make some stupid decisions.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense. You wonder why these things happen, and I don't think it's generally because of the people on the ground who work on these things are stupid. It's the people at the top that allow certain things to happen that are stupid. So, they're the people that get in the way of innovation often. So, but I think Oculus is such a small, agile company. They've got the smartest people I think in the world to be working on this stuff, and they really care about it. And they're focused on delivering. They're focused on games. They really want to push the bounds on games. Their motivation for doing this is to make really awesome games at the very least. So,
and you know what? I think the elephant in the room in all of this, I think Sony might have all the money in the world, might have all the, can hire all the people that they want. I think community is something that Oculus has developed very well. They have this really, really powerful community, rooting for them. And I don't know if Sony, and that impact of this community, the Oculus, the Reddit, the MTVS forums, the impact of those communities and the way they spread the information and support the company, I think you can't put a dollar sign on those things.
Brand loyalty is very important. I think it reaches a point where marketing spend is much more influential
for the mass consumers, right?
Much word of mouth can do, and it certainly can stabilize your foundations, your bottom line. But if you want to get out there mass penetration of these things, you've got to spend money, and that's certainly where publishers can release a really bad game and still make a lot of money off it because they just it's telling everybody it's awesome and they believe it's awesome, then they go and buy it and find out it's not really that awesome.
It's gonna be this whole 2014. I think is gonna be a very disruptive year for the gaming industry. Do you think so too, or do you think it's gonna take a lot more of an evolution instead of in terms of for the gaming industry, it's gonna be by the second time or the third time Oculus releases their third generation device, then you'll see markets starting to shift. But do you think this year will be disruptive, or do you think it'll be testing out the waters?
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting because you still got the previous generation releasing games. It's going to be around for another 2 years. There's a couple of 100 million consoles out there and people still playing them and using them. I bought Gran Turismo 6 yesterday for my PS3. I still use my old consoles quite a bit. I don't think those consoles are done by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think the new generation of consoles are really going to get any traction. They've sold all there's a pretty high demand for them. But I think that's going to taper off for a little bit until we start getting a lot more titles coming out for them. I tend to see it more as like the market expanding rather than like everybody moving in one particular direction. The mobile industry is a new industry, and I don't know if it's necessarily. It may have eaten into the handheld market a little bit for Nintendo, but Nintendo's 3DS is doing really strong. It's a really profitable platform for them still. I still question some of their decisions when they sell their games on their digital store at a higher price than it is to go in a retail store and buy a copy of it. That doesn't make any sense to me. It discourages people from buying digitally.
I agree.
Likewise with VR, I don't know if it's necessarily. It could be very disruptive in that, like I said to you before, when I play games now, after having experienced games in VR, it feels like an inferior experience because it's just not as profound, it's not as compelling anymore. It's like before you hear people talking about being immersed in games. I find that quite difficult now. I don't feel like I'm playing Assassin's Creed 4 and I'm selling that ship and it looks awesome. I really kind of enjoy the game. I certainly don't feel that sense of suspension of disbelief anymore. That where I just kind of get lost in it because I can tell I'm staring at a screen and that my brain is reminding me that this is not as good as something else that I've experienced. So in that case, once I think maybe you have to see all these people that have gotten a VR kit and they're having that same kind of experience. They're like, all I want now is VR. I don't want that anymore. I want all my stuff. And maybe slowly, eventually, everybody will move towards VR. Maybe in 2 generations of consoles, they'll be all VR. They'll come with a VR headset, assuming there is another generation. There's a lot of people that think I'm still skeptical about the whole cloud computing thing, or the the on live systems where they have massive banks of servers which run the games, and they send you a transcoded video of the game. So you just have a controller and a terminal essentially, and you don't have any hardware locally. I still don't believe in that until they solve two things: the fact that broadband infrastructure across the world isn't big enough to support the kind of markets we have right now in terms of its penetration. You can get someone in a low social economic background to go out and buy an Xbox console right now, and they can afford that, but they certainly might not be able to afford a high-speed broadband connection. That kind of penetration. I think a lot of things that drive those things are the people who live in those wealthy kind of cities where that stuff is widespread, but it's not widespread across the world. In Australia, we have this big issue right now. There's a lot of issues with. We had this thing called the National Broadband Network, and we were going to fibre optic the entire country. And the new government came in, and they didn't want to do that because they didn't want to spend the money. And it's been a very big issue in terms of people saying, well, you're crazy because you don't really understand the future economic benefits of having a digital economy and how much that would enhance it and how much it would give us an advantage in the future.
Yeah.
So, countries certainly want to spend the money, but it's a very expensive thing to do. But the latency issue with those kinds of things, I think, what I worry about is that gamers in the future don't appreciate latency as much as we do today. People that play things like Street Fighter, it's really critical to have really, really low latency inputs. Carmack is a big proponent of latency. He has always wanted his games to run at 60 frames per second. For him, that's critical. He always wants to remove as much crap between the input to the display as possible. And that thing is the enemy of that thing. It adds, whatever your broadband latency connection is, plus your transcoding video, which is, video bandwidth is quite high. It probably has compression artifacts in it, so it doesn't look as nice. All these sorts of problems, not having ownership of anything as well. And on that particular issue, I've been thinking now with this new generation of consoles that have just come out, what's to become of everybody's digital library on the last generation? You bought all these things that require you to be connected to Xbox Live, like Xbox Live arcade games and things that, 5 years from now, am I still going to be able to play those? Is Microsoft going to eventually release some patch that says these things can be played offline now? Because eventually they might just take it away from you.
That's so true. If only we had some sort of modular sort of console hybrid PC that you could just extend its shelf life over the years. Like instead of having to replace the whole thing, all you have to do is throw in a new graphics card and keep running. Which is the PC is interesting as well because you got changes in operating systems that can make previous titles not work anymore. Old games that required DOS or really early versions of DirectX may not work anymore. Yeah. And unless you have a copy of those operating systems and the hardware, you might not be able to use them anymore. Unless someone manages to emulate those things, puts the effort into doing those things, and Valve putting the effort into driving into Linux. My experience with Linux hasn't been great. I think it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I'm pro. I think it'd be cool if it does happen. At the moment, I don't think it's until you're getting all the publishers releasing their games with a port to Linux, and the graphics card manufacturers writing good drivers so you get good performance on them. And then you've got ATI's Mantle API. Yeah. You heard of that? Please enlighten me.
So ATI has been developing this new API, so graphics API called Mantle, and their goal is to kind of get away from the issues that DirectX has, and maybe to some extent OpenGL, where between the driver and the hardware and it rendering, there's all this stuff that happens in between, and they have to do all these extra things in between. It reduces the performance of rendering a frame, and giving, I guess what you could call console level access that you have with consoles. Developers can actually write much closer to the hardware and control the graphics hardware more directly, and not have to go through layers of abstraction through the drivers and DirectX to get to it. If Tidal starts supporting Mantle and Battlefield 4 is going to have Mantle support soon, we might see a significant performance increase, and suddenly ATI cards have 25% performance advantage over anything Nvidia is doing, because Nvidia is still reliant on DirectX. Maybe Nvidia will eventually support Mantle. Who knows if the performance is significant enough? But again, that's creating a very specific API for a very specific piece of hardware.
Interesting.
When those things are gone, if they ever go, are you still going to be able to use those things?
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that, huh? That's how long have they been working on Mantle for? How long has this been happening?
I'm not really sure. But I do know that DICE has been working with them for some time, and I believe they're going to release a patch sometime soon that adds the Mantle support. And if you have a ATI 290X, one of the latest cards, you should see quite a significant performance bump. And in fact, DICE is so impressed with it, and a lot of developers are, that they're going to support it for all their future titles.
Wow.
It's integrated as part of their engine, so anything that uses that engine will support it.
That's really awesome. Huh. Wow.
And it's good for VR, because we can have existing cards that are getting a certain level of performance right now. They're going to be faster in the future. Mantle is actually one thing at a software level that's actually going to make things faster, not just advances in hardware.
Wow. You going back to earlier, you mentioned the singularity. Do you think? Let's go down the rabbit hole for a quick sec. Where do you think VR will fit into the greater society 10 years from now? Like what, will it be more than just gaming? Will it be more than just a peripheral sort of object? Will it be, could it take, a different form and have different applications? What's your take on that? Do you ponder much about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, like I said before, I definitely think VR is going to be a thing, and I think it's going to be a big thing. It's going to touch lots of people, not just gamers.
Yeah.
Because it is such a compelling thing when you try it, and like I said before, I think it has and many other people are even experimenting now, using it for different applications, like solving eye disorders or phobias, or could be used as a really compelling way of visualizing training scenarios for different industries, like the mining industry. In fact, one of my contract jobs was working on a mining training simulation in a big cave projection system, and that whole thing was about being in a cave, in a mine, and certain scenarios occurring, like a roof collapse or an accident or a machinery accident, all these sorts of things.
Wow.
And experiencing them in VR would be such a more impactful thing for the trainee than looking at a screen. I think they would have, and they more cost effective too. The system I worked on before had $1 million projection system, just to give you a 360-degree perspective in this environment, and it wasn't even in 3D. Whereas the Rift is a $300 headset and would be much more impactful, right?
Yeah.
So,
do you see yourself? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said, I definitely think eventually solving some of the interaction issues that, at least for the visual perception and the impact it has on that, it's definitely, when I first got my Rift, I thought, it'd be cool to just make a game where you're sitting on a banana chair on a tropical beach and you can hear the waves, or it could be a resort island experience, and you go hang gliding or parachuting or skiing or anything like that, right? And it's not a game; it's just, you could have gamification elements in it, but it's just to go and relax. And you come home from work and you live in London and it's been raining for weeks, and you can go and sit on a tropical beach. 10 years from now, and the hardware performance is so high that it's really photorealistic. Man, I think a lot of people will be wanting to opt into that. Certainly with the state of the world and the depressive state it seems to continue on with a lot of the issues in the world. I think a lot of people are going to be wanting to escape from reality a bit.
Yeah. Do you see yourself in the near or far distant future? Do you see yourself as a VR game developer, or do you think are you exploring different applications for VR? mind you, the assumption that the killer app, we know that VR needs a killer app, but we don't know whether it's going to be a game or something else. And I wonder, like, will it be something else besides a game? I don't know.
Who knows?
True, right? Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, because gamers love games, but I think gamers are also open to anything that's kind of interactive experience, right? Like,
sure.
And if it's a cool experience, and in fact, I think there's two types of gamers. Maybe there's more, but I kind of think there's generally two categories. Ones that really like game mechanics, so they like board games, they like numbers, they like the interplay of the mechanics, and then you have people that want to be immersed in an experience. And they're generally two types of people that are really pro first-person shooters and really being immersed in an environment. They're more of the escapist type of gamer, whereas the other gamer is the traditional kind of mechanics gamer that likes game mechanics. Those things can diverge a bit, and sometimes they come together as one and the same thing. And you try to mash those things together all the time. This constant push for graphical fidelity and photorealism is kind of driven by that, right? We want to be immersed. We want to step out of reality and be in an alternate reality. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of myself, I really don't know. I really love games. I really like making games, but I'm at an age now where I've been thinking about things that I would find more maybe contributive to society, I guess is one way to put it, like working in education or finding something that I can sit back and say, hey, I help people with this thing. That could be rewarding. I just really don't know. A lot of the decisions I make sometimes are purely driven from an economic situation. I need to make money. I've got a family. So I like to try and find something that's interesting and fun. It's great what I do right now. I've been really lucky with the situation I'm in now where my wife also works, but I've made enough money off Lunar Flight that's allowed me to not have to go and get a job and be my own boss and make my own decisions. It's very scary at the same time because, as I mentioned, I don't have a follow-up for the game, so the money I'm making off Lunar Flight has been tapering off, and it's not really now something, unless I do well with the Rift, with the consumer kit. It's kind of my last bet that at least I'll make some money at that point. But, I've contemplated getting another job, going to work at another company. I've contemplated starting a new company that specializes in VR and trying to find investors that are brave enough to dive into that. There's some people here in Brisbane that I've thought about approaching. I think that may be interested in that, capitalist, venturous type people. I don't know. I certainly would like to stay working in VR. It's something that's really, like I said before, stimulated me and...
And I hope you do, because you have amazing talent, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt. I hope you do. you have you have really good. I mean, just from the little I got to play Lunar Flight, I'm telling you, you have something going there, buddy. Stay at it. I encourage you, please. We need you.
Like I said before, I have been thinking about trying to put a team together, but it's so difficult, at least to put a team together without money. I certainly have made a lot of friends over the years in the games industry. There's a lot of people wanting to do indie development in Australia because a lot of them don't have jobs or they're working in jobs that they don't like. Yeah. They're super talented people trying to put a little team together, trying to find someone to give us some money to go away and build some stuff. Often, it's very... Finding that thing that you're going to build is usually the hardest thing. It's like, what are you going to make? What can we make? And we like space games, we like RPGs, we like shooters, we like all these different things, but what do we choose to go after? What works with the strengths of our own skill sets? What do we think people would actually be willing to buy and play? Do we care about that? Should we just chase what we want to make? In fact, Lunar Flight is a good example of me just being totally ignorant to what people want and just building a game for myself. It was driven, rarely did I sit back and think, should I make this easier? No, I'm quite happy with its level of difficulty because that's the experience. That is the game. That's the core experience. Cool. And if I deviate from that, then that's not the vision I originally had. Yeah. So,
let me ask you about, what would be... if you went up to an investor and you said, in your mind at least, what is the minimum amount of just guesstimation, obviously, the minimum amount of money you would need to build something, And what is the dream? What would be your dream budget?
Well, that's an interesting question. If you're starting a team or studio, there's a bunch of extra costs that you probably don't initially consider. Like you need to get lawyers, and you need to pay rent, and you need to pay in Australia. You need to pay superannuation for each employee. So the actual cost per person is usually higher than just the standard wage. They've got to pay taxes and all these other things. So someone that wants to earn, and let's be real here, a lot of people don't want to earn peanuts, and not a lot of people want to take a big risk and just make nothing in the hope that they might make something. So you have to be realistic about the money you ask for, and certainly publishers know what it costs per seat per month. What is your cash flow to keep the lights on? And it's not unrealistic to think that you need several $100,000 just for a 4-man team to run for 6 to 12 months. Who wants to give you $200,000? And I'm quite surprised when you see these Kickstarter budgets that people are trying to build these games with these small budgets. Because when I look at it, I think, wow, looking at the scope of what you're promising to deliver, you're either happy to live on noodles every day, and your particular you're not so much worried about your standard of living. Where you live isn't very expensive. Maybe you live at home with your parents. I don't know. That's great if you do, and you're happy to do that. It's great for young kids, I think, like people that don't have any commitments. Yeah. A person like myself, I'm 37. I've got 2 kids. I've got a car. I've got a house. Yeah. And it's critical that I make the right choice. So when you're thinking about a budget, for me, the people that I want to work with, the people that have the talent that I want to work with, they would ask for anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 each, and so there's if I wanted a 4-man team, I need $400,000 to keep them happy, to have them committed to what we're doing. I don't want them to. I'm not really keen on having a virtual team that works through the internet. I would rather have local people that we can meet together. We could still work from home, but we would meet together regularly. I want that to have to happen.
Interesting.
Whether you rent a studio or not, or it's hard to say. That's one of the toughest things when you manage a team, I guess, or start a new outfit. There's lots of stuff to consider to do that. And I've been operating just on myself. You asked me earlier what my team was. So the guy who wrote the music for Lunar Flight, and he also built a lot of the structures, the little habitats and things. He's a guy named Jason Poots. Yeah. Jason and I met each other in our first job back in 2001, I think it was, at a little company. We both were hired as level designers. So we still know each other today, and he just offered to help me out, and he wrote the music for it and built some models. And another friend of mine, Matt Carr, who I met, he was my lead programmer when I worked on the mining training simulation, and he's doing his own indie thing now as well. He's making a game called Probably Archery. I'm not sure if you've seen that one. Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
His name is Matt Carr, and he's done a little bit of work for me. I just pay him several $100s a day. I tell him I need this particular system. He did most of the work on my leaderboard system. But that's about it. And a lot of the stuff that's gone into Lunar Flight is stuff I've either bought systems off the asset store in Unity. It's a great thing about Unity. You've got this really lively community where everyone's either sharing free code or helping each other solve problems, or they just they sell complete components of a game that you need, like an aiming system or a targeting system or a control input system or anything like that. There's so much stuff on the store. So occasionally I bought stuff. The spacesuit model that I have in the Oculus build, I just went onto TurboSquid and looked for a spacesuit model. It cost me $300 for the model, but if I can make sell 30 copies of the game, that it's paid for itself, and it adds a lot to the game. So it's this little small investments that I've made, and the money that I made off the game, I put back into it to buy stuff, buying licenses for Unity, the Pro licenses, $1,500, and licenses for other software. So
wow.
Yeah.
So wow, that's well, thank you for that. That was super enlightening. Thank you. I needed to hear that sort of detail and sort of numbers being flushed out. Thank you. I needed to hear that. That's awesome.
Sure.
And so what sort of what can a consumer expect Just to finish off these questions in this realm. What could a consumer expect with a from a team, a 4-person team with a $400,000 budget working for a year in a VR game? What sort of things are possible at that point?
Well, that really depends on the skill of the team, their work ethics, that critically how committed they are, and their other commitments as well. Usually people that are highly skilled are older people, and they have a lot of other commitments to deal with, life and family and stuff like that. But that's a difficult question to answer very accurately. It depends on the scope of the project. What sort of game are they trying to make? How much content do they want to put in the game? Often the first part of developing the game is building the prototype, building the core experience. So in Lunar Flight's case, it's like just getting the controls to work and allowing to fly that spaceship around, and then working out what the actual game mechanics are, so what the missions are, how they're built. Once you kind of work out what your pipeline is for building all that stuff, then you can say, okay, cool, we know we can build one level and it has all the types of things in it. Now let's build 10 levels. How long is it going to take us to build 10 levels? Well, each level might have a different theme, so you might want to spend time researching that stuff. Does it need new assets built for it? Because it's on you can't reuse your assets all that much. In Lunar Flight's case, I reuse the assets quite a lot because there's only so few of them. But yeah, there's so many variables really that can influence what you would get out of a 4-man team for that long. What is your team made up of? Is it a designer, a programmer, an artist, and a producer who's kind of managing all the tasks to keep everybody on track of what they need to do? Having a programmer, producer that kind of does both jobs. Do you have a sound guy, who can produce sound effects? If you don't, can you afford to buy sound effects? Because they can be expensive as well. Or can you make them yourself? Can you afford any marketing? Can you go and pay for advertising? How are you going to deal with your marketing? You're going to spend days and days trawling different forums, trying not to be flamed for dropping on a forum of a particular interest group that might be interested, and trying to raise awareness, emailing every possible website that you know of that's into games. I certainly tried that, and I probably only got a response from 5% of them. It's really, really challenging. I got some good wins with a couple of them. I managed to get a few articles out of Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun. So I'm very grateful for that. And certainly once you get onto Steam, there's this kind of slow trickle of people discovering your game, telling their friends about it.
Yeah.
But it's tough, man. Like making games is really, really tough. It's
I hear you. What keeps you motivated to keep going?
Well, since I've been working on Lunar Flight, I've had more work satisfaction working on Lunar Flight than I had in that entire 10 years that I worked for studios.
That's awesome.
It's in my particular case, I worked on a lot of titles that never shipped. They were either cancelled or the studio closed early, or so a lot of the work that I did in that 10 years never saw the light of day. So that's kind of destroying. But at the same time, you're just a cog in the machine. You don't, unless you are one of the leads or the director or whatever, you don't really have a lot of influence over the choices that are made, and quite often you can be very frustrated with the choices that are being made because sometimes you just know some people are out of their depth when they whatever positions. I've worked with some people that probably shouldn't have been in those positions, but that's just the nature of that beast when you work in that kind of big industry. So I much prefer what I'm doing now. I much prefer working with a small team with a smaller scope project and being able to hit a really high quality level and be able to deliver on something that you believe in and your own particular vision is worth more than any of that, even if you're not earning as much money. There's lots of things I don't have to pay for now. I don't need to commute every day. I don't need to buy my lunch every day. I don't make it. I don't have to do any of those sorts of things. So I don't need to get dressed in the morning to go. Well, last job I had to wear slacks and a shirt, and had to iron pants and a shirt every day. And oh man, I hated that. After 10 years of wearing shorts and t-shirts every day to work, that was a rude shock. So yeah, certainly worth that risk and fear of the unknown to enjoy the excitement of it.
Yeah, that's I couldn't imagine myself being in your shoes. But but thank you for having the balls to do it and going putting yourself out there, and because you're exactly what this community, the VR fans need, people who are developing the software for this thing, because if there's no software, there's no Oculus, and you're out there trying to do something about that.
Yeah, certainly. Like, that was one of my motivating factors for working on the Oculus Rift integration. But at the same time, it was very much, this is so cool. How can I make this really, really cool? How can I deal with all these issues? It wasn't necessarily me going, oh, how can I make the best thing that anyone's ever made? That wasn't really what I was thinking. It was like, how do I solve all the problems and make the best experience I can make? So yeah, I think as you said before, I do think Lunar Flight is probably the first game to market that has a built for experience that's been designed specifically for it. Even things like Hawken and Euro Truck Simulator and these other things, they're still accepted. They have compromises because they were never designed originally for it. Whereas when I started my integration, it was like, well, I need a cockpit, and I need it because I'm building VR. I need a new UI system, and it needs to be designed for VR. Whereas those ones, I don't think they added support, but they didn't really go back and add rework all those extra things to really make it 100%. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's been sitting at the top rated title on the Oculus Share site since it went up there, I think for nearly a month now.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think there's kind of this love-hate thing. There's like, particularly with the media, like they see it, they kind of acknowledge it for what it is, but they don't want to talk about it. Like, I don't know what it is. It's really strange. Probably because of the niche and the subject matter. You find people in the media, they're big gamers, but they're not into simulations or stuff like that, and they're not going to spend the time talking about Lunar Flight when they could be talking about Assassin's Creed 4 or something like that, So,
yeah.
But you would think, given its recognition so far, that there would be a little bit more media interest in it. But I've had nothing at all from any media. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Tested.com, they did a review of a bunch of Oculus titles, and they said that Lunar Flight was, and this was early in its initial beta release, was the best thing they tried on it. So that was cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the that will start changing as time goes on, right? As we approach a closer launch window, and who knows, I might see you at the next E3, promoting Lunar Flight. Who knows? It's all in the realm of possibility. Sean Edwards, you've been an awesome guest. I think I need to re-listen to this conversation later on because all the amounts of useful and cool information you gave me. Thank you, man.
Welcome, Chris.
You are truly a scholar and a gentleman of virtual reality. So thanks again for your time. Can I get some more information for the community? How to follow your game? Any updates? Anything coming up?
There's not really any updates coming up. I'm planning maybe one last update to fix a couple of bugs. If you want to get Lunar Flight, just search for it on Steam or search for Lunar Flight on Google. You'll arrive on my website. If you're going to buy the game, please buy it through the Humble widget because I receive 95% of the revenue rather than 70% that way. So that helps me out. Not much else to say.
Well, Sean Edwards, thank you so much for your time. The creator of Lunar Flight, thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Chris.